Lit. The revolution is lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Tommy Sunday study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akilia Nai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. These studies are so important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. This week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela continues reading from the political report to the African People's Socialist Party's 2021 plenary titled African Workers of the World, Unite and Organize. He continues in chapter 6, page 74, beginning at the subhead, the office of the Director of Organization is critical to building our party, and you can find the study materials in the Facebook and YouTube descriptions. For the first hour, the chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we'll open it up for you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, Director Kile, thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. And I want to express my appreciation to all of you comrades who've come to this discussion on today. I want to remind everybody of why we do what we do, and even the basis for the political report that we are studying, that we're reading from, comes from the party from the African People's Socialist Party, the revolutionary organization of the international African working class, the fighting for freedom throughout the world. I want to remind everybody that today is April 4th. It is the 53rd anniversary of the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the most significant mass leaders of the struggle for democracy by African people, certainly in the United States, but that had implications for our struggle globally. That happened on April 4th, 1968. And then I also want to remind those of you who will remember, and to tell those of you who were unaware of the fact that 2 days following the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King that happened in Memphis, the murder of little Bobby Hutton, 17 years old, occurred in Oakland, California. He was a member of the Black Panther Party. He was the first Panther, one of the first Panthers people to join the Black Panther Party, and he was gunned down by Oakland Police Department while he was unarmed. That happened on April 6th. And the thing that helps to make this significant is the fact that these murders did not occur in a vacuum. And though there is a tendency for us in our community and peoples around the world too often to isolate and these incidents of murder, such as Martin Luther King, and people don't celebrate, generally speaking, the murder or anything about Little Bobby Hutt from the Black Panther Party. This occurred around the same time frame, as you should be aware of the murder of Malcolm X that occurred in 1965, just a few years earlier than King's murder, and it occurs. King's murder happened just a few years before the murder of Fred Hampton in 1969, or a year before the murder of Fred Hampton in 1969. That occurred in Chicago, Illinois. At the same time, we saw from the same time period murders of various leaders of our revolutionary movement occurring in Congo. There were Patrice Lumumba was murdered with the leadership of the CIA of the United States. We saw shortly after that, 1963, the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, who was leading the struggle against the colonial domination of African people, and one of the most critical forces that helped to fight for the reuniting Africa itself, and helped to define this issue of the need to fight against this colonialism happening in a new face. It's called neo-colonialism. This was a period of struggle, of revolutionary struggle, of people having identified colonialism as this profound enemy that had to be overturned. This is an era of people like Frantz Fanon, some of whom you have heard of, era of just incredible turmoil. People in Vietnam were fighting against colonial domination. And what was happening more and more was peoples around the world were recognizing the fact that our struggles were connected in the fact that they were all against this colonial domination of our peoples in various places around the world. So this is what occurred. And then with the assassinations, the counterinsurgency, this war made by the United States and other peoples against our movements globally, what we saw was the revolution was put down, held down for a long period of time. That's what counterinsurgency is all about. It is to either prevent the rise of peoples who are fighting for their freedom that is generally recognized as an insurgency by our oppressors. And hence we have this thing called counterinsurgency. The objective is to push down, to keep the people from rising up, or if the people have risen, to put them back in their places. The counterinsurgency. There's a whole science that has been developed by our oppressors to make sure that the people can never be free again. That's called counterinsurgency. And counterinsurgency employs virtually every form of warfare that's possible to imagine. That includes psychological warfare, economic warfare. It includes political and warfare, and it's based ultimately on military warfare to keep people locked down in a state of oppression, keep people confused, etc. And that's what we saw. That's what we talk about, and we should recognize that the murder of Martin Luther King, which got people who needed such things, a streets named for him, a highways named for him, a holiday where people can barbecue, is not what King, this is not what King fought for. This is not what our struggle was about. Our struggle was then about fighting against colonialism at a time where people understood that we were fighting against colonialism, or certainly growing numbers of people had come to that conclusion. And the struggle against colonialism had become the defining struggle of our era. It was the defeat of the struggle against colonialism that has put us back into this place now where we are simply talking about Black Lives Matter, as a substitute for some substantive kind of program or demand or even slogan that would take us forward. It is something that was designed to push us back in history, even prior to the rise of a civil rights movement that could go as far as King had taken it in a changing world that was demanding that we go beyond simply talking about rights that exist within the confines or the definitions of the oppressor state, the oppressor system itself, and recognize that the oppressor system itself was the problem. That's the struggle against colonialism that all over the world, we saw peoples involved in trying to overturn that. And the only place that was not happening is in Europe and in North America, and in those places that were ruled indirectly by Europe and North America. And our party, the African People's Socialist Party, came into existence in the wake of the murder of all of the people who I've just mentioned, and in the wake of the struggle in Vietnam, in the wake of the struggle that had occurred in Cuba, where people were engaging world capitalism, the whole social system, to be free. And when that was pushed back, then we found ourselves all around the world, people assuming that they had to settle for something less than that. People demoralized, people crushed and defeated, people pushed back into a place where it was assumed that white power, white people, white governments could and should live at the expense of everybody else. So today we are contending with the reality that something that I continuously talk about, where 80% of the people on Earth, 80% of the people on Earth are trying to survive off less than $10 a day, and half the people on the planet Earth are trying to survive of $2.50 or less a day. This is where we are now. This is what the people were fighting against when King was killed, when Malcolm was killed, when Che Guevara was killed in Bolivia, when the people had risen up in Cuba and taken back their freedom, tried to take back their freedom in Vietnam. All over the world, this is what the people were fighting for. And this is now we're at this place where instead of being able to claim our freedom, claim victory of the oppressed peoples of the world, we are now contending with the same social forces and having to complete this revolution that had begun then. That's what this African People's Socialist Party was founded on. The need, the requirement, the determination to complete the revolution that had begun in the 1960s, where the people would have power, the working people, and certainly the colonized working people of the world would have reassumed power over our own lives, our destiny in our own hands. So I just wanted to say that King died. This is the anniversary. This day is something like the 53rd anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, of the murder of Martin Luther King. And on the 6th, it will be the 51st, third anniversary of the murder of little Bobby Hutton, 17 years old, who was gunned down in Oakland, California by the Oakland Police Department. And all of this was happening, of course, with some leadership, some support, some solidarity from the federal government, in most instances from the domestic arm, but always something that happened with the support facilitated by other arms of the intelligence organizations inside the United States. So I wanted to just make that statement to you and say that today, this is an incredibly critical moment in history, and that is being defined more clearly, having greater depth, and where contradictions are increasingly being exposed and revealed to the world. Since this political report was given in 2020, shortly after this political report, of course, all kinds of things have occurred. The contradiction with the colonial virus is something that has that is afflicting peoples everywhere, and our ability to deal with this contradiction is also contextualized by the fact that the colonized, the oppressed peoples of the world have been deprived of our own resources, our own medical resources, our own capacity to create life for ourselves and what have. In fact, we create lives for the Europeans, for Americans, for white power. And this is why we have been declared some kind of necessary workers who are bearing the brunt of the colonial virus itself, and without the capacity in so many instances to protect ourselves from a virus that clearly also is something that's a response to the development of capitalism and the actually rape of the planet Earth of various kinds of resources and the undermining of the ecology of the world that has come about as a consequence of the rise of a colonial capitalist system. So here we are today. And I just felt like it was really necessary to make that statement and to say that this struggle of the colonized people, the African People's Socialist Party, has been fighting since our founding nearly 50 years ago to complete this revolution, to bring masses of people back into political life, not just as people who are simply responding spontaneously to the developments around us, to the different kinds of assaults being made against us by the colonial capitalist system as occurs in every day, all of our lives, all over the world. But there's some specificity that today draws attention to this struggle and is growing a different kind of consciousness, helping people to recognize and understand in the United States and globally that we have to go beyond just spontaneity, spontaneous struggle, just spontaneously responding to every attack that's made against us, where the actual system itself is being exposed to public view. And one of the things that's brought this to such a high level, an intensive kind of examination is the murder on 2020 of May 25th, which, by the way, was African Liberation Day, the day this contrived process was initiated in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, that created the Organization of African Unity. So where on that day in 2020, George Floyd was murdered by a domestic, that is to say, a localized member of the occupying military force in the United States that's called police. That the fact that he was murdered was not unusual. The fact that everybody was able to view and experience that murder through video footage that spanned the globe, that gave people an opportunity to see it and to experience, and for Africans to see in themselves this horrible thing that was happening, and for the European, the colonizers, and many of whom are settlers in the United States, but globally, who share this experience because colonialism, European colonialism, dominates the entire world, even if shakily so. This has contributed to the deepening of the crisis, where the society itself has to view itself, and that is a society, now I'm speaking in terms of a global society, that is defined by the relationship of the colonized and the colonizer. And so this thing, that has been capped by, since the 29th of this month, I think it was, where the trial of the domestic cop, the domestic military force, Derek Chauvin, has been occurring in Hennepin County in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we've seen the typical charade, clownish, almost buffoonish actions of decadent so-called civil rights leaders and hustlers who are participating in this industry that has emerged subsequent to the murder of this escalating murder of African people, where everybody can make a buck, where the government is even willing to pay out millions of dollars to victims, families victims of police murder, as a means of pacifying sectors of the community, where the liberals of every character, every kind come out and go through the traditions of saying that we should pray and love everybody and just vote and things will get better, and that hold up the potential for a system based on oppression and exploitation, founded on oppression and exploitation, can cure itself with the help of the people. We can cure the system as opposed to overturning something born in rot and filth and incapable of any kind of self-cure. And when it cures itself, it does so at the expense of those who it victimizes. This is part of how this crisis continues to deepen. And so we started the African People's Socialist Party almost 50 years ago with the intent of completing the Black Revolution of the 60s, taking us away from this subjective approach, this spontaneous approach to every question, and building an organized and capacity all around the world that is rooted, that is informed by revolutionary theory, that tells us to what end, that says that you don't just have to fight around every incident without knowing where it is you're trying to go. And the African People's Socialist Party is that response. It's the vehicle that has been created for the struggle against colonialism, to struggle to overturn this counterinsurgency that came in the wake, that came as a part of the process of murder of Martin Luther King, who died again 53 years ago on this day in Memphis, Tennessee, the murder of little Bobby Hutton, who was also somebody who was gunned down by the United States government in the form of the Oakland Police Department, all of which had the intent of crushing a revolutionary movement that is now arisen, and it has arisen in part and essentially because of the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party that was intent on completing this revolution and not swimming in the same stream that presupposes that this system that was born through slavery and colonialism could somehow be reformed. So we're on page 74 in this document, this political report to the second plenary of the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And so I'm beginning to read on the bottom, the last paragraph on this page, under the title, "The Office of the Director of Organization is Critical to Building Our Party." So the Office of the Director of Organization under the leadership of Comrade Chimarenga demands critical attention. Most of us understand that Comrade Chimarenga, who wears too many hats, assumed the responsibility for this office in the wake of a contradiction sparked by the fraud and dishonesty of a previous occupant of the party's National Office of Recruitment and Membership. Comrade Chimarenga has rolled the recruitment and membership responsibilities into the Office of the Director of Organization, and is working to build a coherent process for bringing credible recruits into the party. I want to say this, that the party is not just who we say we are, it's what we do. And beyond what we do, it is what we do in a process that is designed to solve the outstanding, profound contradictions that have been imposed on our people, not a particular incident. Revolution is not an incident, it is not an event, it is a process. And to have come to the conclusion that revolution is necessary is to have come to the conclusion that the social system, the very same social system within which we participate and try to live and make our lives, this same social system is incapable of doing anything other than oppressing us, no matter how it reforms itself. That reform will not lead to the freedom, the liberation, to the escape of the people who are oppressed by the system. I think it's important to say that. And I'm saying this also because the integrity of the African People's Socialist Party is not based on just what I say. It's based on the fact that we are practical revolutionaries. It's based on the fact that there is evidence of what I say that can be seen in the whole world. That what this party is about is something that can make itself manifest in the real world, that people can go to Folkville and Township in South Africa. People can go to the various places in Europe and in North America where the party is located and is growing, and see evidence of what the party is doing to negate the power of our oppressor, while in the process of building the power of the oppressed peoples ourselves under the leadership of the most reliable sector of the African population in the United States and the world, the African working class, aligned with the most impoverished sector of the population, who usually occupied the space that's been referred to as the peasantry. That's how you know who we are. Because we can get in debate with everybody in the world who say, you stand for this, or you're not this, you're not this, you're not that. And if we had to go simply by what we claim to be and what somebody else claimed us to be, and there is no further evidence in terms of what it is that we do in the world, then it's just a matter of taking our word against somebody else's word. But the fact is that who we are is not something that you have to determine based on what we say, but it's also based on what we do. And the fact that what we do is designed to overturn the fundamental problem that's responsible for our conditions of existence in the world. And so the fact that, back to the political report, the fact that most of the contradictions in the party stem from too few people to carry out its escalating responsibilities during this imperialist crisis should help everyone to understand that serious concentration on the Department of Organization is indispensable to our growth and development. It is essential to carrying out our mission as defined by our 7th Congress political report and all the subsequent mandates and resolutions. We must do it, if only to free up Comrade Chimurenga from the potential of being overwhelmed by the myriad of responsibility he currently shoulders. It is Comrade Chimurenga's dedication, unity with African internationalism, and the party's leadership of our struggle that has carried him up to now. It is dedication and unity for which Comrade Chimurenga has become renowned within our movement. But we must give better definition to the directive organization work as determined by our 7th Congress. It is an office that has never been fully appreciated or utilized by our party. Now that office has also assumed the role of recruitment and membership. And that office is growing, by the way. Since this political report, and within the last couple of weeks even, we see the further development of this office and how within this office there is emerging, there is being emerged, there is being developed a division of labor that's pulling forces into different departments that gives a greater significance and capability to this office. So back to some basis, back to the political report. The recruitment process must become less cumbersome. Yes, we want to protect the party from undesirable elements, unstable forces, wreckers, ideological opponents, agents, and enemies of the people. But the majority of the people do not represent these elements. Our recruitment process cannot be determined who and on by who cannot or should not come into the party. Moreover, we are now armed with a core of rapidly developing and tempered cadre that should make it more difficult for agents, splitters, and wreckers to undermine our party. We are correct in our recognition that the people want revolution. We must also assume that the people want the party, even if they have not had an opportunity to come to this conclusion independently. Otherwise, how will the people's desire for liberation be realized in the real world? And when we talk about this core of rapidly developing tempered cadre, this is happening because we are a party of practice, because African internationalism is a theory of practice, because more and more of our forces are being drawn in concretely into practice. More and more of our comrades find themselves running for office, for example, under hostile conditions within the United States, within the hostile electoral process that was established by the colonial ruling class for the purpose of protecting the system. We find ourselves more and more cadre engaged in a certain kind of political combat within that hostile territory to try and win and bring people into political life, masses of people who otherwise would not be in the political life, masses of people who've been pushed out of political life through the counterinsurgency. And then you've got these forces from our party who engage in doing the work, going among the people on a regular basis, bringing them into political life, sometimes within this context of the electoral process, sometimes like in Everton West, in Folkville, in the township in South Africa, or in various other places where we are located, doing work among the people. And because the party is such a busy and active organization, that there are more and more of our forces when you come into the party. That's what you do. You go to work, you participate, and this is part of the process that's helping to develop the kind of cadre that we have to have in order to move this revolutionary project forward. This is where this core of rapidly developing and tempered cadre come from. That should make it more difficult for agents, splitters, and wreckers to undermine our party, because through this process, people engage in practical work and they know practically what will hurt the struggle that we're involved in. They see that on a practical level. It's not just something they've heard about, that they read about. Practically, we are out here trying to win this, and practically when somebody steps in front of that, it becomes clearer that this is an enemy to the revolution. This is an enemy to the people's struggle to regain control of our own lives. So this is part of what helps us right now as we talk about working to build the office of the director of organization and the forces that have to come into it, working to develop the whole process of recruitment, et cetera, and dealing with the fact that there are all kinds of vermin and slime and agents and things like that who want to come into the party to wreck it, to put the brakes on, to distort it, to undermine it, to function in ways to somehow separate the party from the masses of the people, to keep the people from being able to recognize their interests in their own party. So we said that other outsized fears of bad elements entering the party must be counted and correct. Outside fears of bad elements and entering the party must be counted by correct, disciplined, and consistent application of our regional strategy. Correct and disciplined regional leadership effectively transfers democratic centralist leadership throughout our regions, in the states, provinces, cities, towns, and neighborhoods, workplaces, universities, prisons, etc. This process transfers most of our recruitment responsibilities to party forces on the ground who are actually engaged in advancing our strategy, carrying out the resolutions and mandates from our congresses and plenaries, learning and spreading African internationalist theory to the masses while building the party. Recruitment through practice in this way also informs party recruits from first contact that we are not simply a party of gossiping and social media militants or petty bourgeois intellectuals. We know from history that this will not prevent all bad elements from entering the party, but the regional strategy gives us the appropriate means for building the party from the masses. And in so doing, while building massively, it allows an element of insulation of the whole party from negative impact from single individuals or departments. We must re-examine and actualize the process of individual party members being able to initiate the recruitment process. This should happen without the unnecessary involvement of higher party organizations beyond the local units and party organizations constitutionally required to formalize recruitment through special meetings held at those levels for that purpose. In other words, we want people to be able to recruit, individual members to be able to recruit. And that process will have a person being recruited to come to that unit, to that local organization committee, to whatever committees that's been established for that purpose. That's where the major work will be done in terms of bringing people into the party. And so that this is a form of decentralization under democratic centralism. So the process of recruitment must be institutionalized within the regions, and regional leaders must assume the responsibility for organizational and individual training of new member sponsors, recruitment procedures, and skills. The director of organization must require accountable, well-planned, organized, and recurring recruitment campaigns by and within each region. We must give greater attention to training regular party members as sponsors of incoming party recruits. How does this happen in practice? What is required in terms of training, protocols, structural implementation, etc.? How does this reflect the regional strategy directive to build party and Uhuru movement offices in every locality within the colonized spaces, as well as within the colonizer spaces controlled by the party through our Solidarity Front? These are serious questions that we are dealing with. What it does is transfer the responsibility for making that happen throughout the structures in the appropriate places. So it's not just always some kind of top-down thing that we can't recruit anybody into the party without calling somebody or being in touch with somebody in the international office of the African People's Socialist Party. This must be something that the party is capable of carrying out through all of the structures, while continuing to be cognizant of the fact that the revolution has enemies, that African people do have enemies who want to maintain this status of oppression, who want to maintain the status of brutality, who want to maintain the status of being a humiliated nation under the boot of a foreign and alien power. This is something that we recognize as we do this organizing, but we have to organize, and you can't organize, you can't make this revolution, first of all, without the party itself, because that's the instrument through which people make revolution, as opposed to simply having spontaneous uprisings that might be informed by anger of something that's happened today or happened yesterday, etc. This is what is necessary. And the people have to be able to play a role in this. You have to have people, because you can't have a revolution. And it means you have to have people who are qualified to make revolution, and qualification for making revolution is defined by our constitution, by our protocols, by our mandates, by our structures itself. The proper utilization of this, the proper unleashing of the genius of the masses, the responsibility of the people to change their own circumstances within the context of the theory that we put forth that said this is to what end, in the context of the rules of party discipline that we've created that says this is how we behave if we want to be successful in carrying out this mission, in the context of the profound main organizing principle of the party, which is democratic centralism. This is what informs what it is that we do, how we do it. Then we got resolutions that come from our work. This is not some spontaneous stuff that somebody just went to sleep one night and came up with some kind of silliness. It's something that happens in an organized process. This is what makes it increasingly difficult for our enemies to destroy our movement, destroy our revolution, and to stop us by doing things like murdering a king or murdering a Malcolm X, committing assassinations and overturning governments like that of Nkrumah, murdering people like Lumumba and Mangaliswa Sobukwe in South Africa. We create a magnificent organization that spans the globe and that has relationships through this party, through this structure, with revolutionary peoples and people who are oppressed and exploited and friends of our struggle for liberation all around the world. This is our project. So we say the answers to many of the questions are found within our organizational manual. However, these are questions that the director of organization must address. What is required within the structure of the office of the director of organization to carry out its multifaceted mission? It was during our 2020 plenary that Comrade Chimaring has already loaded. Responsibilities were increased to include the task of leading and building the massive office of Director of Organization. Comrade Chimarenga is right now in St. Louis, Missouri, playing a critical role in the work, the campaign, the electoral campaign work we're doing there, have been doing with Comrade T'Challa Masimba, who is one of the key leaders of the economic development work of our party and our movement there in St. Louis, and not just that, but of one of the key political leaders there. And Chimarenga has also working today with the campaign of Comrade Herdosia Kalambai Bentham, who is the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, who's running for city office in St. Louis, and whose campaign has already shaken the basic foundation, political foundation in that city, which is profound. So Chimarenga is a pretty busy person, and he has been that force who has been able to go to different places. His loyalty is something that's unquestioned, his discipline unquestioned, his commitment unquestioned. And so he has been that stable force that's been able to move and take on the various kinds of responsibilities. That's why he is an overloaded responsibility, but he's never shied away from responsibility of helping to build the party and doing what's necessary to make the revolution. So the task spelled out as mandates for that office, that is the office of the director of organization, during the plenary only touched on the responsibilities of that office. We are now elaborating on the mandates and offering more specifics of what the office entails. We are also offering some leadership on the approach to building the office. Although organized on short notice, the regional conferences conducted by the party globally in January were innovations in the direction of exemplifying a regional approach to building the party. And there were regional summits held. They were called Black Power Summits. These regional conferences happened in Africa. They happen in Europe, they happen in the Caribbean and throughout North America. The regional strategy is the approach. If we do not keep this in mind, it reduces our work by losing sight of the overall revolutionary agenda to defeat colonialism and liberate and unite our Africa and our nation. It feeds this tendency of allowing the tactic to become the strategy, of becoming a form of opportunism where our work bows to the spontaneity of the now, of sacrificing the long-term interests of the party to make a global revolution to the localized, purely practical possibilities of the moment. So the office of the director of organization was energized precisely because the party voted to move beyond the practice of making plans and resolutions that did not always have the oversight of actual implementation. It was because of the party's determination to make the regional strategy real that the political report to last year's plenary stated explicitly that, quote, our newly appointed director of organization will hold this work accountable through regular reports and oversight to make sure these goals are accomplished. And this is something that the party has understood for a while. You know, we have these congresses, we have these plenaries, we have these conferences, we make these plans. And then what happens is that too often the Congress and the resolutions of the congresses and the plenary and the conferences, the mandates that come from them don't get fulfilled. There's not oversight for that. So we come back to the next Congress and the next conference and the next plenary and find ourselves in the same place. So we're saying that now we are re-energizing this office of the director of organization to hold this work accountable through regular reports and oversight to make sure that these goals are accomplished. And then the work to build the office of the director of organization is informed by this. It is a major responsibility, much bigger than just the name of an office. It is fundamental to everything we are doing at this moment to forward our revolutionary advances and capacity through the regional strategy. In Vanguard Up, the political report to our 2020 plenary, we stated, quote, to rectify some of our organizational shortcomings, we will leave this plenary having appointed Comrade Chimarenga Salambayo, director of organization. This will minimize the practice of establishing party organizations and committees that in violation of our organizational principles are structurally unaccountable. Among the constitutionally mandated responsibilities of the director of organization are ensure all party organizations are functioning according to the constitutions, policies set forth by the Congress and the National Central Committee, submit a monthly organizing report, work closely with the regional chairpersons to build local party organizations and units where none exist, work as the chief field organizer to maintain and build the party. I'm also calling on our director of organization to oversee the party's less than effective fraction work. The fractions are the means by which the party ensures the analysis and the interests of the revolution are carried out into our mass work. This does not only include the mass organizations that are not party organizations, but fraction work must also be conscientiously carried out in party organizations such as ANWO, the African National Women's Organization, APDEP, the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, and INPDUM, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, as well as USM, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Our organizational manual does a good job in explaining fraction work and must be used by our director of organization to advance our work. The truth is that the party must lead everything, and the party fraction is our method of guaranteeing that we are always organized as the party in whatever political work we undertake. The initiation of leadership and oversight of our fraction work is simply another way that we provide the tightest organization possible for leading our revolution, especially during this moment of imperialist crisis, when the political stakes are so high and the possibilities of peril or advancement so strong. Everywhere there is a sufficient number of party members to do so, we must initiate fractions in our mass work, including in ANWO, APDEP, INPDUM, USM, etc. We must develop and learn to carry out fraction work. This will not be done overnight, but our director of organization must put fraction work high on the agenda for building our party within the regions responsible for carrying out our regional strategy. This is the way the party's agenda is effectively carried out in every area of the work. This makes us better African internationalists. This makes us better practitioners of African internationalist theory, unquote. So this political report continues to read, the Department of Agitation and Propaganda will have to be intimately involved with the Office of the Director of Organization to facilitate the development of propaganda for the recruitment work and hone the political development of those being recruited into the party. Let me say that again. The Department of Agitation and Propaganda, we read about that in the last session of this discussion on last Sunday. The Department of Agitation and Propaganda will have to be intimately involved with the Office of the Director of Organization to facilitate the development of propaganda for the recruitment work and hone the political development of those being recruited into the party. These departments will be required to function as partners in party and movement recruitment. Like the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, the Office of the Director of Organization must assess what is necessary in terms of human and material resources to effectively carry out its mission. A primary task is building itself and achieving the actual capacity of carrying out its mission, so critical at this time of imperialist crisis. And I've just said there's some issues and struggles that we're having with that question. In part, again, because the leader of that department is stretched out over many areas in terms of responsibility and practice. But it has not prevented the leader to begin pulling together the kind of forces necessary for a division of labor within that department and bringing forces to carry out the mission within that department. And I'm happy to say, as I'm reading this political report for this study on today, that I see evidence of this being consolidated in an extraordinarily important way right now. So again, we're on page 79 now. In terms of, and under the headline, leading and building our mass organizations. Each of our mass organization leaders have the same basic responsibility as our regional leaders. And, if nothing else, one thing that we should get from this discussion, from this study, from this discussion of the political report, it's really important that we go through this political report, because this is what informs our practice that we are involved in throughout the world right now. But what is clear is the tremendous amount of significance we give to organization and to the question of leadership. Profound significance given to leadership. And by leadership, we don't mean just people who have titles. Sometimes that's been confusing for some people. And they've assumed that just the title is enough to say, well, I'm a leader because this is the title. But to talk about leadership, we're talking about cadre and cadre development. And sometimes a leader is not just somebody who's been elected to office, not in the African People's Socialist Party. We have elections because that's absolutely necessary. And that is something that holds the entire structure and everybody in it accountable. But leadership for us means also that if somebody has a position, certainly that they have a responsibility of taking that position seriously and assuming responsibility for the success of the task associated, the mission associated with that position, that committee, that organization. Assume responsibility, total, full responsibility for it. It means that you have to recognize that leadership means that there are going to be problems and contradictions. If there were no problems and contradictions, we would need leaders. If everybody who is involved in the work was capable and willing to do what had to be done, we would need leaders. The fact that we have leaders presuppose that this is someone or this is a committee that has assumed responsibility for carrying the mission out. That means to say what the mission is, to really understand that quite clearly, to identify the contradictions that stand between carrying out that mission and its completion, and to solve the problems, to work all the time towards solving the problems. Beyond that, to be able to see and anticipate contradictions and to be fixing this all the time. It's not a matter of waiting until the next meeting to do something, or I get the minutes and I do something. Leadership is more than that. It means assuming full responsibility within the context of the structures that we've established, and it means having the courage to make a decision, having the courage not only to be correct, but to be wrong. Because if in fact you take responsibility, it means that you will make a decision. Sometimes you'll have to make a decision without the advantage of participation from the leadership. And sometimes even without participation of the committee. You may be in a situation where you have to do that. And if you are successful, you will be applauded by the entire organization, by the committee. But if you're wrong, you'll be criticized for that. And you'll be criticized not just because people will be upset, but also because from this error that you made, the whole organization must learn. You must learn. The organization must learn. And criticism and self-criticism is the mechanism within our party that allows us to learn from our errors, to say, this is how it could be done, should be done, makes it better, and to not be liberal in that process. So, but the thing is, you can't be a coward and refuse to lead because of the possibility that you will be criticized. Because it is probably true in some instances that there's a greater likelihood to be criticized for making an error in the process of doing something than to be criticized for not doing anything at all. So sometimes people call themselves leaders because they don't get criticized because they don't do anything. That's why they're not getting criticized. And that should be the place, the point of greatest kinds of criticism for not doing the work, for not solving the problem, for not identifying the contradictions, for not moving forward, for not bringing forces into the process, for not winning the politic among masses of the people. That's where we have to be looking at making criticism. And so we're calling on leaders to do this. And the thing about our respect for leadership means that we have this weapon that we talked about in the last session that's called the Burning Spear newspaper. And the possession of the Burning Spear newspaper in the hands of every member of our party is one of the means by which we turn every member of the party into a leadership in that community, in that city, in that cell block, on that college campus, wherever we are, that person is transferred into a leadership, not just an ordinary person, but a leadership who is connecting the masses of the people on that campus, in that prison, in that housing project, in that township, connecting the masses of the people to Africans like themselves all over the world, engaged in the same struggle, connecting the masses of the people with the struggles of the peoples all around the world, with ideas that people in the housing projects or in the townships might not have access to on their own. This is who you are when you take that newspaper out on that campus, taking people from the college campus, from the dull and often inanities of the colonial education, to places that they never would go without the assistance of your leadership. This is what you must understand, and comrades. And so leadership is a critical question. It's not just somebody's got a big title or something to that effect. Every one of us is armed with African internationalism principles of theory, and then instruments of practical work that we have to take on, and missions that have to be accomplished in a very practical way. So we say that, again, each of our mass organizational leaders have the same basic responsibility as our regional leaders. You must continue to advance every effort to solve every problem necessary for the success of the mass organization. You must continue to increase your knowledge and organizing skills to build the mass organization. It is precisely your responsibility for deepening the party's connection with the masses of our people. That's what mass organization is about. It is the way that the party extends its leadership over every question, everything, because the people have to have the party to make the revolution. You can have an organization around prisons, an organization around police violence, an organization around this and that by itself. And you can be pretty good at that, but it has to be connected to the revolutionary project. This is what the party does. And so this is the way that the party extends its ideological, political, and organizational reach. And through the study, again, you must bring more people into active participation with the party's strategy for total liberation and unification of Africa and the dispersed African nation under your leadership, under the leadership of its vanguard. You are cadre, which means you do all that is necessary for the success of our revolution from your assigned posts as a mass organization leader. How in the hell was somebody in the township or the housing projects or the prison cells and things like that going to come into contact with what's happening in China, what's happening in Russia, what's the meaning of what Biden and what Trump have done, what's the meaning of what these so-called political leaders are doing in South Africa and in France and things like that? How are people in the housing project even going to get to the question of these things, of places that they've never seen on their own, but the party takes it there. And the party takes it there by creating cadre that lives in the housing projects, on the campuses, in the prison and townships and things like that. This is the way we bring the world to the masses of the people and bring the people into a revolutionary consciousness and revolutionary action. And revolutionary as opposed to simply spontaneous outbursts. And we're going there to also take advantage of spontaneous outbursts, to give leadership and direction to spontaneous outbursts that's going to happen all the time. And sometimes the outbursts are not going to be spontaneous, they're going to be designed. They're going to be led by the African People's Socialist Party. When they're not spontaneous, when they are spontaneous and not led by the African People's Socialist Party, they should be led by the African People's Socialist Party. So my pre-plenary reviews of the reports by some leaders of our mass organizations reveals the incredible developments that have occurred and continue to occur on this front of our political work. It is difficult to review these reports and not marvel at the success of our party up to now in carrying out our Congress mandates and resolutions and reversing the crippling losses incurred by the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. Through the All African People's Development Empowerment Project, or APDEP, led by Comrade Aisha Fields, we can actually see the emergence of an international African healthcare system revolving around the collective participation of African people. APDEP's Project Black Ankh, our anti-colonial answer to the imperialist Red Cross, has initiated the People's War against the COVID-19 coronavirus, colonial virus deploying party and Uhuru movement members throughout the African colony, from townships in South Africa to US cities in Florida, California, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere. The anti-COVID People's War Campaign developed safe practices and protocols that were delivered via social media and by trusted party members and heroic volunteers. Our forces known by our colonized communities did not represent the hated colonialists and their institutions that have never worked in our interests, no matter protestations to the contrary. And we did have forces who were in this community. We anticipated, we were ahead of Fauci and all of these other forces who initially talked about, they initially said, and they lying when they don't remember that conveniently Fauci came out initially and said that masks were not necessary, and actually said that they might be a problem because they give a sense of false security, this kind of thing. We determined in March, wear the mask. We established protocols through our People's War Commission response. We sent people door to door in our communities where people live on top of each other because of colonial conditions, and said, this is how you have to treat this question. We took information about the kind of protocols that people need to establish because we were their neighbors, and people had the ability to trust and believe in what we said as opposed to what our enemies were saying and what they were not saying. You may remember, there was a point where many Africans did not believe that the colonial virus actually affected us. But the party was taking it out there. We stood in lines where people were shopping in the township in Folkville, and really cautioned people to wear the mask, and took masks with us, and even set up processes through which masks could be created. So that's what we did with that, and it was problematic in some instances, in many instances, but this is what had to be done. And so the Black Ankh, under the leadership of the All African People's Development and Power Project, the Black Ankh launched their own telehealth and Ask the Doctor institutions that have won voluntary participation from African doctors, nurse practitioners, and other healthcare workers who provide free medical support and advice to colonized and mostly impoverished Africans throughout the world. All of this work and the growing success of Zenzele Consignment, APDEP's Community Economic Support Project in Huntsville, Alabama, are demonstrative of a major resurgence of our APDEP work that reflects the rebirth of our defeated anti-colonial revolution of the 1960s. The impressive maturation of APDEP as a dual power institution of our party is matched by the apparent maturation of the mass forces of APDEP volunteers. Many APDEP members have been won to a greater demonstration of practice African internationalist unity through taking on expanded responsibilities for agricultural work and other subcomponents of institutional implementation of APDEP's plan of action called for by our 7th Congress resolution and mandates. Through APDEP, our party has developed a practical means by which the forcible dispersed African nation can express its international borders negating unity. We have also begun creating structures of the emergent African nation state, the nation state that Garvey and Nkrumah fought to achieve over the last 100 years. This is another African working class dual power project, exposing by example the limitations of obstructionist colonial capitalism while simultaneously constructing the contesting power of our oppressed nation under the revolutionary leadership of its advanced detachment. Look, I'm telling you all of this, and as we have this discussion, I'm asking you to recognize, and most of you do who are in the party and in the Uhuru movement, that everything doesn't just happen on this clear, straight line, this unending progression towards success like that. There are contradictions in all this work, and sometimes it's dynamic. And so I can report on something today that might have been created and might have been put in motion. Some of it is going to have, our success is going to have gone beyond what we anticipated. The contradictions that we have defined will have deepened in the system itself and make our capacity much greater than what we assumed it would be at the time. Some of what we will talk about will have setbacks. Even I'm reading something now from the political report that I think we did in January, a year ago or so, or February. And some things have changed since then, but the major trajectory I'm defining is one that we are working on that takes us toward an end of our colonial domination and takes us to a place of putting power in the hands of the African working class through the growth and development and capacity of its own independent revolutionary organization, the African People's Socialist Party, the advanced detachment of the African Revolution. So, and certainly the vanguard of the African people, of the African working class. So APDEP's reinvigoration of this agricultural development with a designated coordinator as part of our party's emergent African nation state. APDEP Director Aisha Fields must consider the APDEP work as part of the process of developing a post-colonial independent African government, the Ministry of Development and Empowerment. This is what we call it. Y'all name it something else when we make this revolution, and as we're making this revolution, because the thing is to create a revolutionary project that's in motion. It's not static. It's in motion, it's dynamic. So part of what helps to get rid of colonialism is the real emergence of an independent capacity of the African nation as expressed through its revolutionary leadership to replace it. So this is an ongoing process of replacement that is part of the revolution itself. So this is Marcus Garvey's Black Cross nurses on steroids. And so I'm going to just finish reading this sector on APDEP, the All African People's Development Empowerment Project, this mass organization. An excerpt from a recent report to the party's plenary organizing committee by Comrade Aisha Fields in preparation for the plenary that I'm reporting to now speaks volumes to the development of our party and our growing capacity to govern the post-colonial African world this plenary is helping to achieve. I'm quoting from this report to the by Comrade Aisha Fields to the organizing committee for this plenary. She writes, "This is the work that the African People's Socialist Party, the African Socialist International, and the organizations that make up Uhuru movement have been doing for more than 50 years. It is the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party in this era of COVID-19 that is providing the leadership that is not only giving us direction and hope, but that is building the dual power programs and institutions that are laying the foundation of the independence that we will one day enjoy. It is the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party that is calling on and winning African doctors, nurses, mental health workers, scientists, teachers, and other skilled people to contribute our skills toward the African liberation movement, toward building a united socialist Africa. A united Africa that, with control of its vast resources, vast natural and human resources, would train the doctors and nurses, build the scientific institutions, create the medicines and protocols, make the PPE, initiate the public health measures, and yes, perhaps even develop the vaccines that would ensure the health and safety of African people around the world. We have the opportunity today to join the movement that is changing the world, to join a process of building this positive future for African people, to join the organization, the movement actively building our own independent capacity to meet the healthcare needs of our people as APDEP has done through our international COVID-19 telehealth program. As we have done with our work to respond to the Ebola epidemic in Sierra Leone in 2014. As we have done in response to the need for African people to organize our skills, to build clean water systems, community health workers programs, maternity centers, community farms and gardens, youth and adult educational programs, and more, as a part of the process of building our own Black power that negates the influence and necessity of the colonizers' institutions in our lives, unquote. This was a part of the report that was made preparing for the plenary for which this overall political report was written. I'm continuing now. And we say this work cannot be confused with the reformist charity work that usually characterizes such efforts as those undertaken by APDEC. This is revolutionary anti-colonial work that is conscious of itself as a tool to defeat colonialism, to get it out of our lives, even when it pretends to bring us healthcare relief under its foreign and alien domination. This is where the party has brought our fight to at this moment, opening the door to all African patriots to take place in our liberation under the leadership of the African working class, organized in its own party for the first time in our history. Uhuru, comrades. So Comrade Director Akile, should I stop now so that we can entertain discussion? Uhuru.
Chairman, yeah, I think it'll be a good point to stop now, but I don't want you to stop because obviously the study is incredible, but yeah, we do want to be able to take some of these questions. We have a lot that came in from last week, so I'm hoping we will be able to get to some from today, those that come in. So I want to get to them quickly, but just really want to salute you, Chairman, for this section of the political report, and think it's very clear what we have to do in the party, in the movement to build the party and grow the influence throughout the world. So I want to acknowledge before we get to questions where people are watching from, and lots of cities, locations checked in today: St. Louis, Missouri, St. Petersburg, Florida, North Dakota, San Diego, California, Columbia, Missouri, Lakeland, Florida, Occupy Tanzania, South Africa, Brooklyn, New York, Rockford, Illinois, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Winter Springs, Florida, Boston, Massachusetts, Newark, New Jersey, Grenada, West Indies, Durham, North Carolina, Tupelo, Mississippi, Hempstead, New York, Fresno, California, Australia, Huntsville, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, Haiti, Columbus, Ohio, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Bermuda, Chicago, Illinois, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Barbados, West Indies, Memphis, Tennessee, Miami, Florida, Branson, Missouri, and Tacoma, Washington. So, Huru, comrades, thank you for tuning in. So, Chairman, I'm going to look at some of the questions that came in from last week. And the first question here came from Comrade Abdullah, and he asked, Uhuru, Chairman, can you speak to the importance, and just to say we were talking specifically about the Department of Agriprop last week in last week's section of the political report. So just in case some of those questions kind of line up with that. But it says, Uhuru, Chairman Omali, can you speak to the importance of an African-centered education? You're on mute, Chairman.
Thank you, Comrade Abdullah, for the question. And it's one that I think that a lot of Africans are talking about all the time, about an African-centered education. This is an issue that is a response to the fact that the colonialists have dominated our whole educational system. That's informed us not only of who they are as the colonizers, but who we are as colonized people. And so we've seen movements and struggles that emerged, and some of them are positive. You know, the miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson, I think, written in 1933, was one response to that. But we've read Fanon and other people who talk about how under colonialism, the colonized people are reduced and eliminated in so many ways from consciousness of ourselves as a people, in part through the process. And some of this is not just formal education, but the education that we get in practice through our relationship to the colonial masters that define us as well. And so we've seen movements in Africa, on the continent, that have been characterized as hostile to white man's education, the European education, and and way of seeing things. And they have turned into horrible entities, not because there was something wrong with the struggle against that. We saw Kampuchea when certain militants and revolutionaries came to power. This whole recognition of the influence of colonial education and interpretation of reality on our people, and its contribution to really informing and educating people who were used against us. We've seen that turn into a horrible situation where many people were massacred and things like that. So this question of education, who controls our education, is a critical question. But even if you just look at some of the examples that I've given, certainly about Nigeria, certainly about Kampuchea, we see that it's not enough just to recapture or come to some conclusion about something centered on African education. Because the truth of the matter is that the education must, as a part of the fight against colonialism, colonial domination, foreign and alien domination, that's what helps to define colonialism. And that's reflected in the educational process, the educational system itself. That's only one aspect of the struggle. Another aspect of the struggle is recognition that the nature of the society itself is not static. To overturn the oppressor or to fight against the oppressor in a way to try to bring back some educational system process that has its origin 100 years ago, 300 years ago, that does not reflect the changes that's happened in the world, does not reflect the question of the kind of social system that we have to create and build now, that even attempts to take us back to a place when a social system that might have worked a few hundred years ago, or even a couple of thousand years ago, they can't serve us today. So it has to be a dynamic revolutionary process. And that in the process of overturning the education of the colonizers, in addition to recognize it as foreign and alien, also has to recognize it as a class-based education. So we don't just get education that's white, and that's what most of the world has been stuck with, but an education that is white, that comes from the ruling class. It's a class-based education. It does not inform the working people of the centrality of our existence as that which is the dynamic force in human society. So yes, we have to overcome that, but the revolutionary project, African internationalism, is central and important for that. The advanced detachment of the African Revolution in the form of the party. The fact that the party functions as the general staff. So we have educational process. This is part of it right now that we are dealing with. We have educational process that we creating curricula dealing with our children and other people. The Marcus Garvey program that's created by All African People's Development Project is a part of creating that kind of education, but it's dynamic. It has revolutionary objectives, and not only to get rid of the foreigner, the white man, but also to get rid of and fight against our class enemies introduced into our societies by colonialism, by the white man, if you will. So I hope, Comrade Abdullah, that was responsive to the question that you just raised. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much for that answer, and Abdullah for the question. And that's so clarifying, too, because it's beyond like this just being confronted with whiteness, but the class contradiction associated with the curriculum as well. I don't think I've ever even thought about it that way. So I appreciate the answer, Chairman. A question that came in from Harold last week on YouTube asks, Uhuru Comrade, how do we best counteract the last bastion of the English empire, the BBC, from our position as the quote unquote underdog?
Well, that's part of the same question that was raised before in so many ways. It's an ideological war that we're involved in. The educational system itself functions in that way, production and the distribution of ideas. That's what the educational system does. And that's what BBC does. And it has monopoly in so many ways. It has the technology, it has the actual physical and ideological control of the brains of our people. And the British Empire, Britain, England, the colonizer, has established this system. And as you've indicated with your question, as you've suggested, that they haven't done that for us, they've done that to maintain domination. And so what has to happen, what is critical to happen, is that we have to have revolutionary organization on the ground. We have to be able to contend with them, because even this discussion I'm having with you today is monitored. It is circumscribed by the whims of the colonizer who controls this, the platform that we're using right now. So that's why we say the burning spear is such a critical thing. Our direct connection with masses of the people who are critical, who are the actual foundation of the whole social system, that's the thing that's going to be the determining factor. We have to create more instruments directly. I know some comrades are, using what might be considered primitive methods of communicating with the people, taking information to the people, creating our own forums and things like this, where where hostility is something that we have to contend with. And I remember, an example I've given perhaps during the study of this particular political report, where I read that once during the struggle of the Vietnamese people against the Americans in Vietnam, and especially in South Vietnam under colonial domination, where the oppression was so severe that people couldn't pass out their flyers, couldn't put newspapers in opposition to the system, just as like you have in this country, in the United States right now. And so what the people would do is, the revolutionaries would do, they would find high buildings in the cities, and they would take tracts, that is written documents, propaganda, and they would wet them down and put them on the high buildings and stack them in different places, and the sun would come out. And they would dry the flyers, and as they dried the propaganda, the wind would take them and they would flutter all over the city. That is to say, that people came up with creative means that they could use to get around the propaganda instruments that's in the possession of our colonizer. And the fact that they are our colonizers means that, generally speaking, in terms of technology, military forces, political forces, they are stronger than we are. But the people in the streets, everywhere we live, people are always finding methods to get around the systems that's put up to place constraints on us, whether it's through the welfare systems, whether it's the police who patrol our cities, and the people who set up the roadblocks in our towns, villages throughout Africa and other places. The people find ways to get around them, and we have to become the people to the extent that we are with the people, part of the people, and recruit into our organization from among the people. And we can use the mechanism that the people sometimes have created themselves, refine them, give them back to the people, take them out and get around this information. The point I would make is that we have to recognize that we engage in a struggle with a colonial oppressor. There's no way, they are not going to give it up. They're not going to open the door. They're not going to say, okay, this is going to be helpful. If they say it, they're lying. And they might try to give the impression of some kind of democratic openness and what have you, but it's on us as revolutionaries. And there's not something that we can do as individuals to solve this problem. We're going to have an organizational process through which this is solved. And the African People's Socialist Party is that instrument that will make the revolution, because making the revolution has to be the outcome of the work that we're involved in. The people must have power. Uhuru. So I want to thank Brother Harold for that question. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. And yes, thank you, Harold, for your question. And one more from last week, we have Comrade Daryl, who asks, Uhuru, Chairman, can you speak to what the possibility of African/Asian solidarity looks like in the US and around the world? Do you think it's a positive move to build African/Asian solidarity in combating colonial capitalism?
Oh, thank you. I want to just thank Daryl for that question, because I think it's a crucial question. We've seen evidence of the significance of that question with this white man in Atlanta, Georgia, who killed all of those people, 4 of them being what has been characterized as Asian women. And I've been surprised in so many ways by how so many Africans have expressed a lack of sympathy or unity with Asians in the face of that, who've complained about how Africans are treated in our communities in various places by Africans, by Asians, and how it appears that sometimes the Asians are worse in their treatment and perspective around African people than the white man. And I think that's a serious error in terms of outlook and seeing this for a number of reasons. For one thing, most of the so-called Asians that you see in America, certainly many of them, if not necessarily most of them, all of them are conscious of African people through the lenses of white power. The whole world knows us not through our own expression, not through our own relationship. That hasn't happened since the 60s, when all the peoples of the world who were colonized and oppressed saw the African Revolution as something that was on the horizon, that was making all kinds of advances, and could see their interest as being related to that of African people. That's when you saw that. And then what has happened subsequently is the defeat of the African Revolution, crushing it down, and it's being replaced by these sycophants, these Negro slime, that many of them are in office today, that sleep with the ruling class and what have you, and who find themselves contending with other forces for their place in the sun under colonial domination, and that often has them in conflict with many of the Asian merchants. And people complain because the Asian beauty salon and this and that, where they beat up an African woman and what have you. And I saw this Negro organization, supposed to be a Black militant organization, who at a time when there was this publicized incident where Africans were being attacked in China by Chinese. And so this response was to go out and have militant demonstrations at Chinese restaurants, as that was the response. And I'm sure that was paid for and or supported by the Trump regime to carry out its hostility to win support inside the United States against China, because China is the force that they're contending with in the whole world. And they want to make sure that there is a body of public opinion in the United States that would support that. So that's true. And many of the Asians that we come into contact with are children or are themselves people who were chased out of Vietnam, chased out of China by the revolution in those places. And so they are reactionary. And this doesn't mean that this represents Asians any more than Barack Hussein Obama, who initiating more drone strikes against people in the Middle East, represents me and you, any more than this Negro who is now head of the War Department of the United States government represents you and I, or Condoleezza Rice and Susan Rice and people like Kamala Harris. They don't represent us, they represent the United States government. And the opinions that people have of us should not be based on what these Negroes are responsible for and carrying out their own interests aligned with US imperialism. Think about Yuri Kochiyama, who was a Japanese woman. When Malcolm X died, the woman who had his head in her lap as he died was a Japanese woman, Yuri Kochiyama. Our dear comment, my dear friend, friend of the African Revolution. Think about Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam, who attended meetings held by Marcus Garvey and whose recognition of the role and significance of the African Revolution contributed to the ability to defeat US imperialism in Vietnam. So the fact of the matter is that most of the oppressed peoples of the world have an objective material interest in uniting with African people, and African people have an objective material interest in uniting with those colonized people themselves. So there is a basic objective material interest in uniting with Asian people, the Asian African unity. Certainly the Asian workers and peasants and African workers and peasants there's a basic need for that unity to occur. China, who sent forces into Africa and other places in solidarity with the African Revolution when it was a revolutionary country. And so, it's absolutely necessary that we build this unity. And that's our only protection. That's the only possibility we have for this whole global united front against cracker imperialism, against colonial domination of Africa in the world, recognizing that colonialism is the fundamental structure that permits the existence, continuing existence, the founding and continuing existence of capitalism itself. So yeah, we have to fight against that. And it doesn't mean that all the Asians that you run into, or even most of them, are going to be that smart. What do they know about African people except what they learn from white people and white? What do you know about yourself except what you learn from white people, etc.? So yeah, there's an absolute requirement for us to build this unity based on revolutionary principles. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Thank you so much. That was Comrade Daryl with the question, and I want to really appreciate and salute that answer. So actually, let me see.
That was the question that came from one comrade about
yeah,
naming of Lake Victoria.
yeah, that's Comrade Frank Onan in Australia, and he asked a question for me about a lake in Uganda known as Lake Victoria. How did that come about, and what was that lake called before that witch called Victoria?
Yeah, what you're talking about in terms of Lake Victoria, as it's called, it's not just Uganda, but Tanzania, Kenya, two of the other artificially created countries that this lake encompasses. And this was a lake that was named, I think, in something like 1858, when these white people were searching for the source of the Nile. And you've heard of people like Livingstone. They made this whole thing about Livingstone and you know, this great white man and others. So that's when this was named, and it was named for Victoria, who, as the comrade mentioned, the same one who England that made it possible for them to plant their flag in what is called Australia. The same one that exterminated so many of our people on that land mass, the same ones who are responsible for the domination of much of Africa, the same ones that control India and what have you, that named us all, that named so many people, that named Frank. They're the ones who are responsible. That's what colonialism does. That's what imperialism does. It takes away the identity of those that it colonizes and imposes a false identity, a false consciousness upon them. And so, I mean, that's how it happened. And there were different names that, as we understand that for Lake Victoria before 1858, before these white explorers, as it's called, and these were, you call them explorers, but you see them in African communities on a regular basis, riding around pickup trucks with clipboards, who come to take your land. These were land grabbers. These were people who were grabbing land in the name of the royal companies, such as the British royal companies and et cetera. So that's how that happened. And you know, that, you know, depending on whether one was in Uganda, whether one's in Kenya, or some other part where the lake touched upon, and some indigenous ethnic group was responsible for the name. Like I think in Luo out of Kenya, I think it was called Namlowe. It was called Nalubali in Luganda, and it also had the name Ukerewe, and I can't find the source of that name. So it was called different things, but we're going to do a lot of renaming or appropriate naming in the process of making this revolution, and certainly after the revolution has been accomplished. Just like, you know, I renamed myself once I took possession of my own brains, my own consciousness, and my own opposition to colonialism. We will find that occurring all over, and it is occurring in different places. So, Comrade Frank, I'm glad that you are able to ask that question. I'm glad to hear from you in Australia, and I hope that while you're there, that you are also able to recognize the existence of that Australia, how it looks, how it functions, what it does, as being a consequence of what the same England that was able to create Lake Victoria provided in the process of developing the whole international global social system founded on colonial domination of other peoples in Africa and African people. Uhuru. I hope that was helpful, Brother Frank.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Frank. And I know Frank is on with us today. So I'm sorry, Chairman, there's one more question from last week from Comrade Dennis. And Dennis asked, her Chairman, why do we as a colonized people begin to elevate the overwhelming brainwashing techniques that the colonizer has so ingrained and embedded in our minds so massively? I am inclined to believe that too many want to think that if we just keep on the path laid out by the colonizer, we shall overcome. Personally, I eternalize this genocide with much grief.
Don't be grievous, comrade. Just keep participating in the revolution. That's all we've been talking about. The very question that you just raised is that it's reflected in every question that was left over from the last study and the one that just preceded that came from Comrade Frank, the control of our brains and things like that. And I'm encouraging people who need to really understand more about colonialism and how it impacts on everybody, to read stuff by Fanon and to read stuff by Albert Mamie on colonialism itself, because they talk a lot about that. And this was a discussion that we were deeply involved in prior to the defeat of the Black Revolution in the 1960s, about how colonialism articulates itself in the world. And what I loved about Fanon, who was a psychiatrist, but a revolutionary, who clearly understood in terms of colonialism, the way that the colonized cures itself from the kind of problems and perhaps the despair that is spoken of by Comrade Dennis, is to kill the colonizer. That's the only cure. And so we just have to build an organized capacity to destroy colonialism, to kill the colonizer. And don't be fretful or despairing, even when I say that, because the fact of the matter is, when you kill colonialism, you kill both the colonizer and the colonized. Colonialism, the system, is a condition for the existence of both the colonized and the colonizer. Kill colonialism, you kill the colonizer, and that heals us all. And the process of killing it is also healing. You will see yourself, if it hasn't already happened, you will see yourself feeling so much better in terms of even your mental state and things like that, to the extent that you're capable of engaging and fighting this horrendous monster that's rests on the backs. I mean, think of the people, the damage that was done. I remember like the testimony of this young African woman who watched George Floyd being murdered by Derek, whatever his name was, Chauvin, who is put forth as an ex-policeman, who, in fact, in which is a way that the colonizer, the system of colonialism, the colonial state, tries to separate itself from the act of the colonial, an act of a component of that state that's designed to keep us oppressed. And this woman was saying how she felt so guilty, and this tearful discussion that was coming from this martial artist who was complaining and saying something to the cop even as he was killing George Floyd. And just think about this guilt, this shame, this humiliation that African people experience in every aspect of our lives living under colonialism. This has to be cured. And the only way you can cure that, and you will see this cure, is already being manifest in the 10,000 demonstrations from May 26th through something of August of last year. You see, this is the patient engaging in curing itself, and the colonized are in the process of curing. And this is what the discussion we're having today, this political report, it doesn't speak of curing despair. It just speaks of making this revolution, and making this revolution is something that takes the disease out of our lives, out of our body, out of our psyche, out of our consciousness, out of every aspect of the society that we have to be able to live in as human beings. This is the struggle that does that. And so I hope, Comrade Dennis, that don't despair. Don't despair. We are winning this thing, and the growing resistance, and even this discussion that we're having today, even this ability to come and say this that you've just said is better than any psychiatrist's couch that you could be on, expressing how you feeling and what you think about that. How did that make you feel? It made you feel less free. And what we are doing now is saying that the response to that, the appropriate response, the healing response to that, is to make this revolution and take the power out of the hands of our oppressor, and that means the power to define. And this is a struggle that's been going on for a while. It's not a new struggle, as we've said earlier on. So we don't have enough time in this one session to deal with this question, because everything that we've spoken of up to now is a part of the whole colonial question and how it affects our consciousness, our psyche, and the instruments and tools with which are deployed or employed in order to make that happen. And what we are doing now is expressing the instruments and tools to overturn this relationship that gives them the power, that allows them to have the power, maintain the power to control us forever. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
So, I mean, Dennis, I hope that was helpful, Dennis. I mean, I've seen you before, and I know you're on top of this. And I know that every now and then we run into stuff that just, makes us more susceptible. What do you call that when your resources are low? What do you call it? Your more susceptible disease when your immune system is lower. And this kind of session now is something to strengthen your immune system to make it more difficult to be depressed and by what we're looking at. Let's keep fighting. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dennis. So we have just a couple more minutes left here in the Q&A portion. I saw a Comrade Eugene, it's kind of I think it's more phrased as a comment, but Jeremy might want to speak to it. It says, with the historical information we're aware of, the many experiments and atrocities the colonial imperialists have conducted under the guise of medical and science, how should we have any confidence in a vaccine that with today's medical advancement isn't DNA specific to harm people of color, and how was it developed in 6 months and can assure us there aren't long-term detriments? And he also says, I believe he's saying he thinks this is impossible, but I don't know if you want to speak to that, Chairman.
Yeah, I think it's an important kind of discussion because it's one that's we're dealing with and grappling with all around the world. And I think it is absolutely appropriate. It would be absolutely idiotic or crazy if we were not suspicious. All the evidence in this relationship we have with colonial white power suggests to us, it tells us that they have never done anything that was designed to help us. Even if they called it medicine, they had this thing. There's a white man called Dr. Death in South Africa who created all these clinics all over South Africa that were supposedly designed to cure AIDS. And African people were going there or to protect us, to vaccinate us from AIDS. And African people were going there in the townships and everywhere. And what this white man was doing was actually giving AIDS, injecting AIDS into the people. We know the history. We know the foundation of gynecology, how African women were experimented on. We know how in Africa and Puerto Rico and what have you, the birth control pills were tested. We know that I think it may have been Johnson & Johnson, but I'm not quite sure the name of the corporation that took the so-called vaccinations into Nigeria and other parts of Africa, and that the Africans there are refusing to take the vaccination because of the consequences of that. We know that the French doctors on open television were saying, let's try create the vaccine by testing people in Africa, just like we did with the AIDS vaccine. So we know all of this stuff is happening everywhere. And so it's appropriate. And we know that Africans in Australia are refusing to take the vaccine because of our history and relationship. And what's offered to us as the basis for Africans' reluctance to deal with the vaccine is the Tuskegee. But in Australia, I'm sure that they never heard of Tuskegee. They just have their own experience. And I'm sure that the experience we have is not just confined to medical experiences. The overall relationship we have with imperialist white power, they've never done anything to help us, except if the conditions that were affecting us had the potential for affecting the whole white population. If in fact they still are going to use us and have us living in these holes, these colonial enclaves throughout this country and the world because of the global economic system that has been developed, and creates the possibility and the likelihood that they can't contain the disease, then there is a greater possibility that they would create something that might be beneficial to African people in order to prevent themselves from suffering the collateral damage of what is happening with African people. And also, we have to look at the fact that they are not just doing this in a vacuum. They're contending with Russia and China and Cuba, and all these other countries don't necessarily have it in their own immediate interest to do bad things to African people as the colonial powers do and have done historically. So this helps us to make a judgment beyond just our own immediate experience and be able to give a greater weight to it based on everything else that we see happening in the world. Now, I know that the party through APDEP created this People's War Commission. And we've got a body of doctors and healthcare workers and what have you who function as medical advisors in dealing with the COVID-19 issue. And this is something that they've been looking at and studying over and over again. And they have not concluded that they can come to African people and give a conclusive response in terms of take it or don't take it. But they, many of those people, by the way, have taken the vaccine, if not most of them, if not all of them. These are questions that we are going to have to address, recognizing the history of how what they call medicine has been used against us, recognizing that they have eliminated our ability to create our own medicinal programs and modalities to deal with us, recognizing that most of the disease that afflicts the planet Earth, including COVID-19, have their origin in this colonial capitalist social system that exists, and also the fact that there are other forces who are contending with the United States. So when you look at China, when you look at Russia and their creation of a vaccine, they're not just creating vaccines in some vacuum, in a political and economic vacuum. They are in contention with what the United States is doing. And so this means that the US doesn't have a monopoly, Europe doesn't have a monopoly on this, that they can simply use to target African people without there being consequences in terms of the efficacy of their competitors' vaccines being something that far surpasses what they're trying to do. These are things that people have to weigh in making this, making determinations about taking the vaccinations or not. And I think we'll be saying more about this in the upcoming days, but this is what helps us to weigh this. And I want to say this, the fact that they did it rapidly, quickly, is something to be suspicious of on the one hand. On the other hand, if in fact there is some kind of pandemic that's sweeping the earth and that's killing people in alarming numbers and what have you, I think it gives a greater urgency to solving the problem that would have make it necessary to violate various protocols that have been established in order to get a vaccine on the market otherwise. So Eugene, I hope that was a helpful response to what it is that you just raised. Possibly not, but I hope that it is. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And thank you, Eugene, for the question. And I know we're like running short on time because I know like some things that I have been hearing, and I don't even know like the validity of it at the moment, but the whole like this thing of like the vaccine possibly becoming like a mandated thing where you can't go to grocery stores, you can't travel, things like that. So that'll be interesting.
That's a contradiction. I mean, that's something that will inform some people's determination to take the vaccine, that is to say coercion. And that's what states do. States have the ability to coerce, and you can't catch an airplane, you can't go to the supermarket, you can't do this or that. And so those are going to be growing factors. And other countries also will place a prohibition on being able to come into those countries because of fear of the spread of the vaccine as well. And this is part of what I think should help us to make some kind of judgment as well, because it's not just a localized US kind of thing that we're talking about. We're talking about the whole world involved in this discussion, this struggle to develop and create something that will protect their populations. Not just something that the US and Europe is doing to attack our population, but it's an overall more comprehensive, more dynamic issue. And I hope that we don't just have a knee-jerk response to it one way or another. White man said, do it this way. And everybody knows the white man is God. So if he says, this is the solution, just do it. I remember thalidomide, 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 something like that. Thalidomide, which was something that came up with a long time ago, much earlier, before you were born, Comrade Akile. And I'm happy that it happened so much earlier than your birth, because it was put forth as something that was going to be so helpful for African women, and it resulted in so many children being born malformed and what have you, this magic thing that they had created, and it took years for that to emerge. So I think, again, this is overwhelmingly something that the world is involved in. It's not just something US and Europe monopolize, and that should help us to make decisions about the probability or possibility of using it. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much. And I just want to thank all of our viewers watching on Facebook and YouTube, and tuning in through the whole study with us. And now we are at the end of the hour, Chairman. So before I go into announcements, do you have any words to close us out with?
Well, I know, Comrade Akile, you're going to make an announcement regarding the election on April 6th, which is, again, the anniversary of the police murder of Bobby Hutton in Oakland, California, young Black Panther member, 17 years old, as a part of the project to crush the revolution of African people, as part of the whole cluster of murders and assassinations and overturning of governments that this and other European imperialist powers were involved in. But the fact is, on that day, the election for Ward 3 in St. Louis, where NPDM President Kalambayi, Herdosia Kalambayi Bentham, as she is called, is on the ballot. And we have them running scared. When I say we, I'm talking about those people who have taken 1,000 acres of land in the African community, push people out of their homes to create this multi-billion-dollar spy center, the so-called national global spatial spy entity that controls satellites, that send drone missile strikes and things like that, control all of communications, or much of it, throughout the world. That is being threatened by this election. That's in opposition to it. The fact that the reparations is on the agenda in a very practical way, saying, give us this land and this institution that you've created to harvest the land in our communities that's responsible for gentrification and homelessness and joblessness and things like that. That talks about a platform for Black community control of the police, control of our education and things like that. This is an anti-colonial project that has implications for African revolution and freedom, and the freedom of the peoples of the world. So this election is happening on the 6th, on Tuesday. And I know you're going to say something about it. I just wanted to contribute to that discussion by saying how significant it is as evidence of the fact that we've overcome, or in the process of overcoming, the defeat of our revolution and putting revolution back on the agenda, and revolution not being just some empty slogan, but the overturning of a system that steals our life, our resources, our properties, our dignity, etc., and in replacing it with our own power in our own hands. So that's going to be on April 6th. That's Tuesday, and everybody should go to vote Kalambayi, KALAMBAYI.org, and do whatever you can to support that campaign. And if you inside the United States, you should also send money, because they can use all the resources they can get, because they're not only up against the direct colonial power, but indirect colonialism, where you've got a dynasty of forces that's held that seat for something like 40 some odd years for white power, really for white power to the disadvantagement of African people who live there. So thank you, Comrade Director Akile, and I want to thank all the comrades who've been participating in this study up to now. Uhuru.
Chairman, well, I just really want to appreciate you again for taking us through this study, for presenting this political report to the whole African world. And thank you to the participants of this study today. And actually, to get into our announcements, to start us off, we will be playing a video from the campaign. So we'll go ahead and do that.
My name is Herdosha Kalumbai Bentham, running for alderperson in the 3rd Ward. I was born and raised right here on the north side of St. Louis. Our community is good. I lost 2 brothers that were wonderful people that got caught up in a social system that did not work for us. I disagree with the racist assumption that Black people are bad when we were forced to fight just to survive. I believe we can solve our own problems by creating power over our own life. Our neighborhoods are being looted by the city, big money, and those that work with them to push us out. My pledge to you is when I get to City Hall, I'm gonna work for you because I am you. I am demanding that the city pay reparations to the Black community for genuine economic development that uplifts all of us, not just a few. I will fight to stop the efforts of the city to make St. Louis white. I will fight to overturn the violence in our community by going to the source of the problem, poverty and powerlessness. We need the power to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. We are a vibrant community that built the wealth for others. Now it's time for us to build the wealth for ourselves. I am Herdosha Kalumbai Bentham, and with your support, I will be the next alderperson of Ward 3 in St. Louis. Vote April 6th.
Uhuru. So you saw it there, and go to votekalumbai.org for more information. And for all of those in St. Louis who have the capacity to vote, Herdosha Kalumbai Bentham. So for the remainder of our announcements, just want to let you know that this study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, where we're winning the war of ideas. For your revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com. And for revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is spent on the focus on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuru.org, and fill out our contact form. Order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, and at burningspearmarketplace.com, and you can also find other works written by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other leaders of our movement at burningspearmarketplace.com. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations is convening their 5th electoral campaign school virtually on April 10th and 11th, 2021. The Electoral Campaign School is a means by which we open up a new front in the struggle for Black self-determination within the U.S. and elsewhere. With the Electoral Campaign School, the coalition challenges the monopoly of the electoral arena by a select segment of our community that has special ties to capitalist white power. Register for the school at blackisbackcoalition.org. On Saturday and Sunday, April 17th and 18th, 2021, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement will host its annual national convention under the theme, Make Wall Street Pay Reparations. USM is the mass organization of white people formed by and working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party to build the movement for white reparations to African people. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement Convention will feature keynote presentations by our very own Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Solidarity Committee Chairwoman Penny Hess. For more information, you can go to uhurusolidarity.org. This year's African Liberation Day, organized by the African People's Socialist Party, will be a 2-day program held virtually May 22nd and 23rd, 2021. Our theme is Build the African Worker State, and it is a continuation of our party's trajectory to bring the African nation together under a solitary strategy that will lead to the liberation of our Africa and African people. Register today at alduhuru.org. On Tuesday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Tune in by calling 347-857-3293. Ralph Pointer sits on the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee and chairs the BIBC's Political Prisoners Working Group and also leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. We're also calling on people to follow the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus, COVID-19. APDEP launched an international telehealth program, which is a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. Like and follow the Lawezi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Secretary General Lawezi Kinshasa does frequent live events, such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French. To get alerts of when SG Lawezi is going live, make sure to like and follow his page today. And if you're looking for more opportunities for live political education from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Chairman Omali Yeshitela's Facebook Live page and the Burning Spear TV YouTube page, with the Chairman's weekly address to the African nation, discussing important topical issues and providing us with an African internationalist analysis. Lastly, to keep up with our movement events, visit the burningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you all for watching. And also like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study.